It's the worst version of Reason.
It's the best version of Reason.
One product, two opinions. Which will prevail? Stay tuned for the ultimate Reason 12 review.
That was a little weird. But what's up, people? This is Evan from Stock Music Musician. You might remember me from such videos as Reason 11 review or maybe Reason 10 review. Well, today I've got special news for you. I'm here today with my Reason 12 review. So there's a lot to cover here. I'm not going to take up any more of your time. Let's jump right into it. The one thing I do want to let you know is that Reason 12 creates a lot of interesting challenges for how to review things. I've put together a whole timeline where you can jump to the sections that directly kind of impact you and how you would be using Reason 12, because if you're going to use it as a plugin versus using it as a standalone DAW, my thoughts are very different on Reason 12. It's part of Reason Plus instead of as buying it separately. If you're upgrading, whatever, just go to the sections that are most useful to you. Or if you're a super fan, then be sure to watch the whole thing. And obviously, if you're a super fan, you're going to want to turn the like button up to 11. And to subscribe. And if you got any questions along the way about Reason 12 or anything music production related, just leave them in the comments below and I'll be happy to help. Okay, so the first real quick question I want to answer is, what is Reason? What is Reason? And that's actually a somewhat complicated question to answer. Originally, you would say that Reason was a standalone piece of music making software where you could create your own music. But these days, with Reason 11, Reason can actually operate as just a totally independent, standalone plugin that you can use inside of other digital audio workstations or DAWs. So if you use Ableton or if you use Pro Tools or Logic or anything, you could use all of the instruments from Reason inside of that DAW, all of the effects, all of that jazz. So Reason is more than just a DAW. It is also a plugin. It's loaded with tons of instruments, effects, utilities. You can record audio. You can use other plugins inside of Reason. It's a little bit of everything, and it's a great tool for creating music, but it is not for everybody, and that's why we made this review. And I want to take a minute to offer you this free new Combinator 2 patch that I put together. It's called the Hall of Mirrors. It turns everything into really cool, far out sounding patches, sort of unpredictable reverbs and movement, and lights up cool with skull eyes. So can't beat that. There's a link down below to grab that. Go click on the link down below to download it. I want to give you a quick overview of what we're going to cover here today. So you see there's a lot to get through, and there are going to be, like you said, links just down below. You can click them, jump to whatever is relevant to you. So what makes Reason unique compared to other tools for creating music? Well, I already kind of hinted at the first thing, and that is the ability to use it as a plugin or as a standalone DAW. And you can completely make music in it or not. But what really makes Reason unique in either situation is that it is all about connecting devices together, making them talk to each other, and do kind of cool, organic things that you would not normally experience in a typical digital environment. A lot of happy accidents, basically, if you know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, then it's just going to be a lot of accidents. But hey, that's why I've got this channel, which you should subscribe to, so that you can stay up to date with everything in Reason. And in the future, I'll be doing a big deep dive into the way all the cool instruments can talk to each other. So really, that's the fundamentals of what makes Reason unique. You might have heard of something called modular synthesis, and Reason is kind of like that writ large. You've got a bunch of devices, you've got a bunch of modulators, you've got a bunch of effects. You can hook them together, they talk to each other, and you can come up with really creative things. It is like a sandbox for musicians, is how I would describe it. And it's a lot of fun, and it's very usable for the creative process. As we'll talk about later in the review, though, it does start to bog down, and its age is showing. But if you're the type of person that likes to tinker, that just enjoys the idea of making music for the pure sake and the pure joy of making music, Reason might be for you. Let me just tell you a little bit about me before we go farther. My name is Evan. I've been using Reason since Reason 2.5. We're going to cue in some really advanced effects here so that I'm sure that'll look super high tech. I've had my music streamed millions of times, at least 1 million times. They've been placed in Netflix documentaries, on Bravo, on the Outdoor Network, TV channels everywhere. Songs I have created in Reason. I've made thousands of dollars licensing music in Reason. They've been streamed everywhere. Yes, I can be considered a Reason power user. I've got courses on Reason if you want to check them out. I've got tons of videos on it. I'm here to teach you how to use Reason. I know how to use it. I've really enjoyed using it. Doesn't mean it doesn't have flaws though, which is what I want to help you figure out as we go farther into this review. I want to tell you about what's new in Reason 12. So Reason 12 has 4 headline features, and we'll get into them in a little more detail in a second, but what are they? First, we've got a brand new high definition display, basically brought to the whole DAW, and also the ability to zoom in. Second, you've got a faster browsing of patches. Third, you've got a brand new sampler, Mimic, which is a very powerful and fun sampler. Finally, you've got one of the core defining utilities within Reason, which is called the Combinator, and that has been updated, taken to the next level. It is a super cool creative tool for making sounds your own, for being able to twist one knob and have it do a bunch of other stuff. By basically, it just lets you take this whole creative chaos, these happy accidents, and take it to 11, which is, I think, what a lot of us want to do as musicians, and experiment with the whole just sort of studio world. So let's talk about all of these a little bit. So first, the HD graphics. If you're on a lower resolution screen, I don't think you'll see much of a difference, but I'm using like a 5K iMac, and it is night and day to me. And I didn't really realize how fatigued my eyes were using the old version of Reason, but now it is much better, much clearer. The ability to zoom in a little bit and have a little more resolution is much appreciated. At the same time, it's 2021. Is having HD really a selling point, or is it just an indictment of a DAW that didn't have it up until now? I'll let you be the judge. That said, I think HD has been implemented really well in Reason. They've reskinned a few things, such as the Regroove mixer, just to give everything a better look in HD. Most of the rack extensions that I've seen look really good when upscaled into the HD platform, although you do need to, at least right now, separately download those textures. You might not need to do that come, the future. Another thing is the zoom. The zoom works well. It gets you up closer. Unfortunately, it's a global zoom, so whatever you do on one window of Reason is going to be zoomed in on another window of Reason. Also, there's not the ability to just zoom in for a second, see something real quick, and then zoom back out. Would love to have it mapped to a hotkey. I know some people have reported a lot of lag and slowdown with this bump to HD. For me, like I said, I've got a new-ish computer and everything's been super smooth. And it's actually, I think it's a little faster and easier compared to Reason 11. What about the upgraded browser? Well, now you can search for patches and samples within Reason way faster than before, like instantaneously. That said, all you can do is search for names. There's still not a tag-based browser. It does not automatically sync the sample that you want to play to the BPM of your song. It is pretty weak as a functional tool as a browser, but it is fast. So there's that. I wouldn't necessarily call it a selling point at the moment. In fact, I'm surprised they really wanted to headline this so much as just be like, oh yeah, and we upgraded the browser a little bit. But they do say that this upgraded browser is going to be, they did a lot of work behind the scenes, and it lays the foundation for future improvements. So I'm hoping to see that, and hopefully sooner rather than later. I'm really hoping that the idea of Reason Plus, which we'll get into in a minute, will help them sort of iterate and make improvements to Reason faster and more consistently. The next big thing, the new sampler, Mimic. It's amazing. I love it. I've done probably over an hour worth of videos on it at this point, and I'll just put a little link to that playlist so you can kind of see for yourself. And I don't want to waste your time by going deeper into all of that, but suffice it to say, Mimic is a really great new sampler. You can use it either in pitch-based mode or in slice-based mode. It works pretty well in each. I think it definitely works well enough in each for most people that this could be the only sampler you own, unless you are really a hardcore sample-based musician. Then you're probably going to want to go with something like Serato Sample. This doesn't quite have as much fine control as that or as Machina, but basically for the majority of us that just sprinkle in a few process samples, this is really, I think, a game changer, having it added to Reason and no longer needing to buy a $100 other plugin. And in fact, I think there are things that this does sort of from a creative perspective. Some of the built-in onboard effects and playback algorithms that are included with Mimic, I think actually allow some creative possibilities and some happy accidents again that you don't encounter in other samplers. And so I think in some ways the creative potential is more with Mimic, because the ideas you'll stumble on with Mimic are going to be different than the ideas that you would stumble on with Serato, but I think they're both equally valid. And I think that mostly I will be using Mimic because it's just the workflow works really well for most of what I do. They're already saying that between pre-release and release, they're going to add pitch detection. I'm hoping that this means that they might start adding minor features to things in the future. Don't know, but could be a good sign. The new Combinator. Ooh, the new Combinator. What to say? What to say? Well, basically, if you liked the Combinator in the past, you're going to like it more now. Adds more features, more flexibility, the ability to create your own designs and your own skins. Anybody can use it. It's super democratic, so I think we'll see some really cool things. It adds, I think, up to 32 knobs and 32 buttons, so you can really get complex with what you're doing. It also features a new sort of built-in mixer, or not really even a mixer because you can't adjust the individual volumes, but a merger, which can often just be helpful to have in there. You can also use it as an insert effect now, which is huge from a workflow perspective. You just drop it right in and everything's sort of contained together, which I love. They could have gone farther with the new Combinator. Things like XY pads, more advanced programming options, the ability to put in a few meters up front so you can actually see what's going on in the panel itself. I would love to have an input meter, for example. All in all, we still have to wait a little bit to see how much cool new stuff gets released by people that are really, much more into the patching world. So those are the new features, the major new features in Reason 12. But that raises a question of which version of Reason 12 are you going to get? And you would think it would be straightforward, right? There's only one version. There are now kind of two versions. There is the core version of Reason 12, which is basically just this, but more. Basically, it's Reason 11 with more. And that will cost just what you pay to upgrade it or to buy it outright. In contrast, there is also something called Reason Plus. And with Reason Plus, you get a monthly subscription to Reason. It includes all of the devices that Reason Studios has created outside of just the context of Reason. Although they only work in Reason, they are not technically considered part of Reason. This is probably, $1,000 or more worth of plugins. Some really good things like Algorithm and Friction. And so with Reason Plus, you never own anything. You're only renting. You're not even renting. You're licensing the use of Reason 12, and all these additional plugins, and then also weekly new sample packs created by the Reason community, some of the leaders of the Reason community. Or if you get Reason Plus, you get more, but you also have nothing when you're left with it. Whereas if you get Reason 12, you own everything, but you don't necessarily have as much. I think Reason 12 includes more than enough for most people getting started to make music for a long time. How are you going to use Reason? People want to know. I want to know. So let me know in the comments if you plan on using it more as a plugin or more as a DAW standalone. That's really going to influence whether or not I think you should get it. So let's dive into that. If you're using Reason as a plugin, congratulations. I think you are the ultimate use case for Reason 12 right now. Reason 12 includes a lot of really cool devices, samples, effects, all of that you don't necessarily find in other DAWs. And whether it's Reason Plus or just the regular old Reason 12, you're going to be adding a whole lot of fun synths, the ability to start doing CV things. You're going to get access to the ability to buy rack extensions, and there's some really cool other products out there. Fun suite of tools to, make great music. Use Reason as a plugin. It's super cool. It's fun. It's creative. It's inspiring. If you are a Reason plugin user, I would consider creating, the shells of songs in Reason, because Reason is a great DAW for getting the song 40% of the way there. It is super creative for that. It's like boom, bam, bam. Oh, wow, these sounds are all working together organically. We got this awesome stuff happening. And then basically just on the way that workflow works, the outdated sequencer, things like that, you hit a brick wall with Reason. And once you want to start like making sure, oh, I've got this EQ plugin on every channel, or I want to make sure I've got a tape saturation plugin on every channel, you will want to tear out your hair in trying to make that happen. And just about every other DAW I've seen makes that super easy. As a plugin, if you're looking to spend, in the neighborhood of $500 for a suite of effects and synths and stuff, I think Reason acquits itself well. I think if you want to do realistic sounds, by this I mean like you're trying to recreate having a studio with a bunch of musicians in it in your house, then I think for the money, Native Instruments Complete is the way to go. It has better emulations and sampling of things like guitar players or horn sections, string sections. It has comparable synths. Some of the synths are really fantastic, like Massive X and Reactor, but Reason has some really excellent synths as well. I think Reason overall has much better effects than you would find in Native Instruments, but there's some really interesting effects in Complete that you don't find in Reason, and vice versa. I think Reason's effects are very interesting, and for example, Scream is just an incredible effect. The Echo is fantastic, but Replica in Complete is great too. Both come with really cool sample libraries. I think the sample libraries in Native Instruments Complete are a little more modern sounding, whereas the stuff in Reason sounds like it was like last updated maybe 10 years ago, like as a general locus of where the sounds are. But to me, samples are the least important part, because there are so many ways to get samples these days, whether it's Loop Cloud, Splice, or you're a Reason Plus subscriber and you get new stuff every week. Whatever it is, push things one way or the other. In contrast, if you're really trying to like recreate a vintage studio or a vintage keyboard collection, Arturia V is the way to go. It's about the same price, and basically what they've done is just modeled the heck out of all of the classic keyboards from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and today. Of course, we basically just skipped over the 2000s and the 2010s, but hey. So if you're looking for these really realistic emulations of classic keyboards, then 100% Arturia V is the way to go, but Reason doesn't really do that. The Arturia collection doesn't do most of what you need to do in a studio. Like, there's just not going to be really great drum stuff. There's not going to be much natural sounding things. There's no real effects coming with it, all of that. So if you're an EDM or a hip hop producer and you want a studio in a box, Reason is a pretty great place to look. If you're more a rock musician that wants access to a virtual studio, I think Complete's the way to go. If you're a synth head, then go in the direction of Arturia. Reason is a standalone DAW. This is the harder thing. Look at this box here. Standalone music station software, which I think is maybe a better term for what Reason is these days than as a digital audio workstation. Frankly, I do not see massive improvements in the way that you make music within Reason. You can create a lot of music and make great things, but do you want to finish your music in Reason? Do you want to mix it in Reason? Can you really do intense audio editing in Reason? I'm a little disappointed in that, to be honest. What we see here in Reason 12 is a lot of updates, but none of them, the HD does fundamentally improve the core aspect of Reason, as does the browser, but that also really benefits users of Reason as a plugin. Reason has a lot of shortcomings as a core DAW. First of all, the sequencer is just incredibly outdated and clunky compared to what you see in other DAWs. Additionally, it doesn't have VST3 support, even though it's been doing VSTs probably for 6 years now. 5 years, the workflow is just grindingly, maddeningly slow if you start making complex tracks. The community has posted literally, like, if you go to Reason Talk forum, there's a multi-page thread of all the concerns that need to be met to really make Reason modern. If I were to recommend Reason to somebody today, and they said, hey, what DAW, I've never made music on a computer before. What DAW should I use to start making music on? I would not say to buy Reason, because frankly, they haven't committed. They say they're going to make it, keep it up to date and make it modern. They've done nothing to show that they want to make Reason a updated, modern DAW with capabilities similar to its peers. This is the first time I've been doing Reason reviews for a long time and using Reason for a long time that I would say that if you're brand new to Reason, I would not recommend buying as my core DAW, because I am not convinced that they're going to do anything to make it better as a DAW. They're going to do a lot to keep up with the synths and the devices, and it'll be a great plugin, undoubtedly. But they are not doing anything close to what its competitors are doing. Like, even if its competitors have been standing still for 5 years, Reason would not have closed the gap, but its competitors have been improving their DAWs over that time. And Reason has not only not closed the gap, but the gap has expanded. I think look at it this way, right? An analogy I often give is like a car. If a car didn't have an airbag and then they added airbags in 2021, you wouldn't give them a pat on the back and be like, oh, you guys are super innovative now. You'd be like, where the was that airbag all these years? And that is just so many things. And I genuinely feel like their product development is driven more by marketing headlines than it is by creating features that will benefit their users. So, for example, they want to say, oh, we've got VST support. So they added VST support, but they half-assed it. They do not support VST3, and they haven't. And why hasn't that happened? It's been since Reason 9.5 that VST was introduced. This is literally 3 full iterations of Reason, and that hasn't been brought up. What are you doing? They say, they were going to do dark mode, and they've only half done dark mode. The mixer isn't in dark mode. Do what you're going to say and make this, commit to making it good. And if not, then I really don't think people should start using it. I think as a DAW, I think you should start using it as a plugin. It's a great plugin, but I wouldn't dedicate my time to learning this DAW from scratch right now based on what we've seen. That said, if you are upgrading, I think Reason 12 is a great choice. Why? Why, oh why? Well, I think first of all, as I suggested, if you're approaching the age of 40 or thereabouts, and maybe your vision isn't quite what it used to be, the jump to HD and zoom are easily going to make your life just so much easier. You're going to enjoy being able to use Reason now, because you'll be able to see things instead of having to put on your glasses and squint. Not only that, but I think you'll get into sampling if you haven't been using much of it already. I think that you are going to, you're probably a Combinator user, and you're going to really enjoy this extra flexibility. And you probably have a well-organized library already, and so just being able to browse it faster is going to be great. On top of that, at this point, most people that are using Reason that are in there, that have been using it for a long time, like me, you're probably in your 30s, 40s, 50s, you don't want to learn a new DAW, right? People are going to say, oh, look at those guys, and learn another DAW. But it costs hundreds of dollars to buy a new DAW, generally, and it takes hundreds of hours to be able to use it well, and maybe even hundreds of dollars in courses to learn how to use it well. You just want to do things the way you've been doing them, and Reason 12 is definitely better than Reason 11, and better than Reason 10, better than any version of Reason. And so if that's what you want to be doing, and if that's how you want to be making your music, 100% recommended for Reason users looking to upgrade from 11, from 10, from any previous version. This will just work better, smoother. It's got more power, more flexibility, and more options. Shout out to all the haters and to the haters of the haters. There's a group of you that are going to say, take your lumps with it. Stop complaining. Well, first of all, no, this is a review video. I am, hopefully, Propellerheads listens, and they will make these changes and improve the DAW. Everybody wins. Hopefully some people out there are, listening to this in terms of their money, so they don't throw their money away. I'm hoping to help you make a good choice with your hard-earned money. I really hope that people that are starting out from scratch do not just jump into this, because 4 years from now, you may not have a DAW that's improved at all. And other DAWs might be doing incredible things. I don't know. But I wouldn't start learning it from scratch right now. At the same time, people will say, well, why don't you go learn another DAW? I've already told you why you shouldn't go learn another DAW. It costs a lot of money as well, and it takes a ton of time. If you've invested hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars in Reason, I think they should at least meet you halfway. Or some people say, oh, quit complaining, back in the day, DJ Shadow made Introducing on an MPC. The Beatles recorded Rubber Soul on a 4-track. Yeah, they did. And they were incredible productions. They are still fantastic. But do you think last time DJ Shadow went into the recording studio when he was working with Run the Jewels, do you think he was using an MPC or was he using a modern studio? You think when Paul McCartney was just recording with Beck, he's like, hey, let's run this through a 4-track. No! That stuff was hard to work with. It's incredible they achieved what they did. Kudos to them. But that's not how they would choose to work if they could work with something better. And we shouldn't be just content. And like I said, I've achieved a lot in Reason, but it also has hindered me in some ways. And if people say, well, use another DAW, I do. I've started, using Logic over the past few years because of that, because it could do what I needed. I would have loved not to have spent hundreds of dollars on Logic and literally had to almost stop producing for 6 months so I can actually get up to speed on that DAW and then still constantly look things up. That would have been great. I would have loved to be able to do everything in Reason. But they just didn't make updates fast enough to the core software. And until they do, I think that power users are going to continue to struggle. And I think this is actually a thing that I think the haters are getting right, to be honest. I also want to talk just about a few myths about Reason. I see them come up a lot. And so let's just get these out of the way real quick. First, yes, you can use VSTs in Reason. You just can't use VST3 plugins. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, you couldn't. These days, you can. I've heard that time and time again. Yes. Or you can't use it with VST plugins. Yes, you can these days. Another myth I often hear about Reason is that there is a Reason sound. That might have been true back at this point when there were, 10 devices in Reason, 15 devices, and that was it. You couldn't, an external synth, you couldn't buy a rack extension. Reason didn't have the Reason Studios devices and things like that. Sample kits weren't easily available. They came in CDs. You had to order in the mail. Or steal, your friend would have a hard drive full of LimeWire samples, something like that. Yeah, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there was a Reason sound these days. Cool, unique synths in Reason and unique effects that sound great. They're good to use, but I wouldn't say they define the sound in any way that any other DAW has a sound. It's up to you. The palette is so big that it's really up to you to define. If you are somebody that just enjoys making music for no other purpose than you have fun making music, and that's a really good reason to make music. It might even be the best reason to make music. Reason is fun. Reason is absolutely the most fun and inspiring DAW out there. It is like I said it before, it's a creative sound box for music. And you can guess what happens sometimes, but you're never going to be quite sure. With some of the ways you wire things. There's a great tone palette. You can quickly dial things in. And if that's what you enjoy doing, if you're not interested in finishing songs or releasing things, or if you're cool just, sharing demos on SoundCloud or whatever, which is totally fine. And that was me for years, for over a decade. Use your Reason. You'll love it. It's fun. You'll have a great time with it. But if you're trying to, make beats for people, if you're trying to make a name for yourself as an artist, or if you're into music licensing, trying to build a home studio where you can record people and have them come in, Reason is probably not going to cut it for you these days. It just fundamentally doesn't do a lot of the things that a modern digital audio workstation should do. Doesn't mean it doesn't have great sounds and effects and all of that. It does. And it doesn't mean it's not fun, or even that it's not easy to use. But it's hard to finish a track well. What do we think about Reason 12? It's undoubtedly the best version of Reason. It's great as a plugin. It includes so much value for producers, and it slots in well with what a lot of other DAWs don't do. If you're looking for your first big upgrade and you do EDM, you do hip hop, I think Reason is probably a great choice for you as a plugin. If you are into more like rock and acoustic stuff, Reason is probably not great for you because it just doesn't necessarily have those instrument sound banks or instrument plugins built in as much. And then also it just doesn't do audio editing as smoothly as other DAWs. I would recommend everybody check it out on Reason Plus first and see if it's for you. It's basically, you know, a risk-free trial.